Welcome to our channel Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. The first murder looked like a mistake. The second looked like a coincidence. But the third changed everything. Police believed they were hunting separate killers until quiet details began to surface. A mark that appeared again. A pattern in timing. A calm that felt wrong. While the public saw chaos, investigators saw control. Someone was watching. Someone was planning. These murders were not random. They were connected by clues so small, they were almost invisible. And once those clues were finally noticed, the truth behind the killings became impossible to ignore. At first, the murders looked like separate crimes. They happened in different places, at different times, and the victims did not seem connected. Police officers treated each case as its own mystery. Each crime scene told a different story. One victim was found in a quiet home. Another was discovered in a public place. A third was left on the edge of a road. To most people, these killings felt random. But experienced investigators know that killers often leave patterns behind, even when they try not to. In the first case, the victim was a middle-aged woman who lived alone. There were no signs of forced entry. The house was neat and nothing valuable was missing. This told police that robbery was not the motive. The cause of death was violent but controlled. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. The killer did not rush. That detail stayed in the minds of detectives. They noticed how calm the scene felt. It's almost too calm for something so terrible. The second murder happened weeks later, far from the first location. This time, the victim was a man. He was found in an area where people passed by every day. Again, nothing was stolen. His wallet, keys, and phone were still with him. At first, officers believed it could be a personal attack. But when the medical examiner completed the report, a strange feeling returned. The injuries were similar to the first case. The pressure, the placement, and the timing were almost the same. Then came the third murder. Fear began to spread. The public started to ask questions. Police still had no suspect. This victim was younger, and the location was different again. But the same strange calm appeared. No signs of struggle. No loud noises reported. The body was left carefully, not thrown or hidden. It was as if the killer wanted the body to be found, but not disturbed. During a meeting, one detective finally spoke up. He laid photos from all three scenes side by side. The room went quiet. The similarities were impossible to ignore. These were not crimes of anger. They were not sudden acts. These were controlled actions. Someone had planned each step. One small detail became important. Near each victim, investigators found a similar mark. At first, it seemed unimportant. It could have been accidental. But when photos were enlarged and compared, the mark appeared in the same place every time. It was too similar to ignore. That was the first real sign that the murders were linked. Timing became another clue. All three killings happened late at night. The streets were quiet. The houses were dark. The killer chose moments when the world was asleep. This showed patience. It showed confidence. This was not someone acting on impulse. Police then looked at how the bodies were positioned. In every case, the victim's body was placed with care. The hands were arranged. The head was turned in the same way. These were not natural positions. Someone stayed after the killing. Someone took time. Security camera footage was reviewed again. At first, nothing seemed useful. But when footage from different locations was watched together, something strange appeared. A figure was seen more than once. The face was never clear. The clothes were simple. The walk was steady and calm. The timing was always close to the murders. Witness statements also began to match. One neighbor heard soft footsteps. Another person remembered seeing someone leave slowly, not running. No one reported shouting or panic. This supported the idea that the victims trusted the person who killed them. Forensic teams then focused on trace evidence. A fiber was found on one victim. At first, it was believed to be common. But later tests showed it was rare in that area. When old evidence was tested again, the same fiber appeared on the other victims too. This was no accident. Police also noticed that the victims shared similar lifestyles. They lived alone. They followed routines. They were predictable. This made them easy targets. The killer did not choose randomly. The killer observed, waited, and planned. Another disturbing detail appeared when investigators reviewed phone records. In 2 cases, the victims received calls from unknown numbers earlier that evening. The calls were short. No messages were left. The numbers were prepaid and unregistered. This suggested planning and caution. The crime scenes were revisited once more. This time, police looked for what was missing rather than what was present. There were no defensive wounds, no broken furniture, no signs of fear. This meant the victims did not expect danger. Slowly, the idea became clear. The killer did not force entry. The killer was welcomed, or at least not feared. This suggested charm, familiarity, or deception. The killer knew how to appear safe. By the end of the review, detectives were no longer asking if the murders were connected. They were asking how long this person had been doing it. Each clue alone seemed small. But together, they formed a clear pattern. The murders were linked, not by chance, but by design. The hunt was no longer for answers. It was for a person who believed they could stay invisible forever. Once police accepted that the murders were connected, the entire investigation changed direction. Detectives stopped treating the cases as separate events and began building one long timeline. Every detail, no matter how small, was placed together. When viewed as a whole, the story became clearer and far more disturbing. Investigators began by mapping each crime scene. They marked locations, routes, and nearby landmarks. Patterns appeared quickly. All scenes were close to main roads but hidden from direct view. This allowed the killer to arrive and leave without being noticed. It also showed knowledge of the area. The killer was not lost or guessing. They moved with purpose. The timeline of each murder revealed another link. In all cases, the victims were last seen alive during normal routines. One was returning home. Another was finishing daily tasks. Nothing unusual stood out. This meant the killer waited for the right moment, blending into normal life. The victims did not sense danger. Phone records became a deeper focus. Detectives studied not only calls, but also phone tower data. In 2 cases, a phone connected briefly to towers near the crime scenes and then disappeared. The phones were later found destroyed. This confirmed planning. The killer did not want to be traced. Investigators also examined how the victims were approached. There were no signs of panic. No defensive wounds. This suggested the killer spoke calmly, possibly even kindly. Psychologists believe the killer used trust as a weapon. The victims did not fight because they did not feel threatened, as more forensic results returned. Similarities continued to appear. The same type of fiber was confirmed on all victims. It was linked to a specific fabric used in limited clothing. Stores that sold it were identified. Sales records were reviewed. Most buyers paid cash. This was expected, but one purchase matched the time and area of the murders too closely to ignore. Security footage from that store showed a person whose build matched the figure seen near crime scenes. The face was unclear, but the posture was the same. Calm, confident, unhurried. It was not enough for arrest, but it narrowed the search. Police then looked at behavior patterns. The killer did not strike randomly. The gaps between murders followed a rough pattern. After each killing, there was a pause. This suggested the killer reflected on their actions, possibly relived them. This behavior matched someone who sought control, not chaos. Old unsolved cases were reopened. Detectives searched for earlier murders with similar traits. Slowly, older files surfaced. Some cases had been ruled accidents. Others lacked evidence, but when reviewed again, the same quiet details appeared. Similar timing, similar victim profiles, similar calm scenes. The idea that the killer had been active longer than believed changed the urgency of the case. Police feared the killer was growing more confident. Each murder showed more control, less fear of being caught. Witness reports added another layer. In one case, someone remembered a friendly conversation near the scene days before the murder. person asked simple questions, nothing alarming. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it meant everything. Investigators also noticed something disturbing about the crime scenes. In each case, the killer left something behind, not by accident. These items were small and easy to miss, but together, they formed a pattern. It was as if the killer wanted to leave a signature, but not one that could be easily traced. Psychologists believe this was intentional. The killer wanted recognition, but on their own terms. They wanted to feel smarter than police. Linking the murders was part of the killer's satisfaction. Public fear increased as media coverage grew. People locked doors earlier. Neighbors became suspicious of strangers. Police knew they were running out of time. The killer had shown patience and planning. That made them dangerous. A turning point came when a witness from an older case came forward. The person recognized details from the news. They remembered someone asking unusual questions near a crime scene weeks before a murder. The description matched the figure seen on surveillance footage. The clues were no longer quiet. They were pointing in one direction. The murders were linked by method, behavior, and intent. The investigation had moved beyond doubt. It was now a race to stop the person behind the pattern before another life was taken. With the murders now clearly linked, police shifted from investigation to prevention. They believed the killer would strike again. The pattern showed confidence growing with each crime. The time between murders was becoming shorter. This suggested the killer was gaining comfort and control. Detectives built a full behavioral profile. The killer was organized, patient, and careful. This was not someone acting on emotion. This was someone who planned, watched, and waited. The killer likely lived or worked near the crime areas. Familiarity with streets, timing, and routines showed this clearly. Patrols were increased in areas that matched the pattern. Officers worked quietly, avoiding public attention. They did not want to scare the killer into hiding. Surveillance teams began watching individuals who fit the profile. Many leads failed. The killer continued to blend into normal life. Then a new detail emerged. The small objects left at each scene were re-examined closely. Under special light, investigators noticed faint markings. These markings formed a symbol. It was nearly invisible, but it appeared on every object. This was not chance. This was a signature. Experts were brought in to study the symbol. It was not random. It had meaning. After days of research, the symbol was linked to a specific background. It was used in training materials within a certain profession. Access to this symbol was limited. This discovery sharply reduced the list of possible suspects. Records were reviewed. One name appeared repeatedly. This person had access to all the locations. Their work allowed them to move freely at night. They had no criminal record. They appeared calm and helpful to others. On the surface, there was nothing suspicious. Surveillance began carefully. Detectives followed the suspect at a distance. They observed routines. They noted habits. The suspect lived a normal life. They spoke politely. They avoided attention. Everything matched the profile. Then the suspect made a mistake. Late one night, they returned to one of the crime scenes. There was no reason to be there. The area was quiet. The visit lasted only minutes, but it was enough. Killers often returned to places tied to their crimes. This behavior confirmed police suspicions. Search warrants were issued quietly. The suspect's home and vehicle were examined. Inside, investigators found clothing that matched the fiber evidence. Tools similar to those used in the murders were discovered. Most importantly, items connected to the small objects left at the scenes were found. The links were undeniable. The arrest happened without force. The suspect did not resist. They did not argue. They showed no emotion. This calm reaction matched everything investigators had learned. The killer had always been in control, even at the end. During questioning, the suspect spoke very little. They did not deny involvement. They did not explain motives. They simply listened. The evidence spoke for them. Forensic proof, timelines, witness statements. and behavioral patterns all pointed to the same truth. Investigators reflected on how close the killer had been to escaping. Each clue alone was small: fiber, a mark, a call, a symbol. None of it mattered by itself, but together they revealed the truth. The case became a lesson in patience. It showed that killers are often caught not by one big mistake, but by many small ones. The killer believed they were invisible. They believed their calmness protected them. They were wrong. In the end, justice did not come from luck. It came from careful work, attention to detail, and the willingness to listen to quiet clues. The murders were never random. They were connected by design, and it was those quiet details, slowly uncovered, that finally ended the story of the person who believed they would never be seen. In the end, the murders were never solved by one big discovery. They were solved by patience, by listening to quiet details others ignored: a fiber, a mark, a moment that felt wrong. Each clue alone meant nothing, but together they exposed the truth. The killer believed they were invisible, hiding in plain sight. But every action leaves a trace. And when those traces were finally connected, the silence broke. Justice did not arrive loudly. It arrived quietly, carried by the clues that linked the murders. For watching more amazing videos like this, subscribe our channel Crime Loom.